Hey everyone, welcome back to Deep Dive Deck Techs. I'm sfreezy, and we have my favorite commander from the new set, Elevator Pitch. Tap to reanimate. That's not even an exaggeration, but it does come with some fine print, as in damn they printed a commander this fine. Why thank you, wizards. Xu-ifit Osteoharmonist is so weird and unique, so let's get a good look at that text box. 3-mana creature in black is already at sweet spot for an earth. A 2/3 human wizard, somewhat underwhelming. Hold on a second. Am I reading this right? Tap, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It becomes a skeleton in addition to its other types and loses all abilities. That's certifiably insane and I'm all for it. They don't even get finality counters, which is newest way of stopping shenanigans and loops, which this commander does have. Being skeletons is some solid type of synergy, and we're mostly putting the biggest chonkers in our yard and bringing them right out to party. Like that one friend who brings a 7-layer dip to the Super Bowl. It doesn't even make it to the fridge. Get that shit on the battlefield. Beat your opponents with the biggest vanilla beaters to ever be summoned for 0 mana, and destroy-based removal is very ineffective versus our deck. Xu-ifit is sweet, and I love both versions of the art. This is a bracket 3 deck, as we have a lot of straight to graveyard tutors, and we have an infinite combo that mills out all of our opponents. With 0 actual game changers, though I do think Entomb should be one. This commander is super important to our strategy, as a lot of the cards need some hoops to jump through in order to work effectively, but who doesn't love it when a Rube Goldberg beats the snot out of their opponents? So for this deck, we're going to start off with the protection and insurance policies we have in place to make sure we don't stumble if our opponents are playing responsibly. First, we have a pair of shoes for both our feet, Lightning Greaves and Lava Spur Boots. Greaves is obviously a better protection piece because it gives hexproof, but Lava Spur Boots can be found off of Urza Saga. Both are great on defense and equally importantly offense. Making a vanilla 13/13 swing immediately increases the speed of our clock immensely, and if we have these out, it'll make our giant skelly boys even more aggressive. Greaves is better because it can be freely moved in between pieces for 0 mana, so you can swing with a newly created attacker and then put it back on your commander to make sure he survives to your next turn. Next, we have Malakir Rebirth and Unearth to get our commander back if he's removed. Malakir instantly. We also have Command Tower for the same ability on the land. We really want to use this commander, he's friggin' sweet. So let's make sure we can make that happen. Unearth also has the added utility of hitting a lot of our massively statted downsided creatures that we can turn into upsides. We're also running the only effective redirect in black, Imps Mischief to protect our commander, or equally importantly, our graveyard. We also have Torpor Orb for a main deck symmetrical hate piece for blink and flicker stuff. A lot of your downside creatures, if they get flickered, can really hurt you, so you don't want that to happen. Torpor Orb lets your creatures come in as giant statted monstrosities with no drawback, and even though we're running this, we're still not running the worst drawbacks like Eater of Days and Leveler. Their drawbacks are just too insane if an opponent flickers them. You can't have those cards in the deck. So this card's really nice to include because it both hurts a lot of opposing strategies, especially Blink, or anything with a ton of ETBs and creatures, and then actively helps us. It's also great with Overlord of Belmurk because it can enter as an enchantment and still trigger. And this card can get back our commander if it dies. It can take us 4 for the graveyard. This card's a great card in pretty much any black deck. Since we mentioned Urza Saga, we have some other great targets. Shadow Spear to make sure our removal is always on, as well as letting us punch through with our gigantic attackers, who otherwise don't have evasion and even gain chunks of life. Nile Spellbound will help fight an opposing graveyard player, and for an additional mana, draw us a card, not to mention triggering both Void and Descend for our cards. We also have Expedition Map to find us many of our powerful lands, which we'll get to later, but I do love me a deck that cheats on spell count by having busted effects on lands. Our most impactful target may often be Phyrexian Dreadnought, which will die immediately, unless you feel like sacrificing 12 power of creatures or have Torpor Orb in play. I know this guy is uber expensive, but you can proxy any card for 10 cents. I don't play CDH. Even if your opponent's a salty schmuck, you can always bring a replacement for the card you proxied, which I recommend doing. This card is not a game changer. It's not Gaia's Cradle. But if your playgroup is unokay with proxies, don't run this card, obviously. Maybe ask them why, but this card is not broken by any means, just costs so much because it's a reserveless card. Most playgroups will probably be fine with the proxy. If not, just take it out. Or if you got it like that, buy the card, but it costs as much as like half the rest of the deck, so I didn't buy it. Lastly, we have Wayfarer's Bauble to fetch Swamps, the original, no landers in this deck list, and Soul Ring. Even though I don't like the card, it goes in every deck ever, so here it is. Also Tutor of Saga. For the rest of our ramp, we have some of our juicy lands from earlier. We're mono black, so we have both Nykthos and Cabal Coffers in conjunction with Urborg to each tap for insane amounts of mana. This deck plays out with a low curve, but has some bombs your opponents will not see coming. Lastly, we have Phyrexian Tower, which can ramp us, but also lets us preserve a giant body from being the target of exile-based removal, so we can resurrect it all over again. We have 2 additional free instant speed sack outlets, and these let us fuel our graveyard as well. Umbral Collar Zell lets us surveil to find key pieces or bin our meat puppets. Alter Dimension is busted in half and part of our 4-card combo. The one is our commander, who must be equipped with Thornbite Staff, and another is literally any creature, so it's barely a 4-card combo. You really just need Alter Dimension and Thornbite Staff to infinitely mill your opponents. Sack creature to mill, bring it back with Xu-ifit, sack it to mill, untap Xu-ifit with the effect of Thornbite, sack to mill, repeat it, and profit. Next, we have some tutors directly into our graveyard for the future Osteoclast class. Entomb is OP and really should be a game changer. 1 mana instant speed goes in every reanimate deck ever, and your opponents will have little warning before facing down a 13/13 that no longer gets -X/-X, where X is your life total. File Entomber is the Entomb effect, but costs 4 mana and brings a 2/2 Death Touch body. This guy can tutor a bomb to the yard and stay back to defend the fort. In this deck, Buried Alive represents 3 giant beaters you get for free that you play over the next 3 turns. Unmarked Grave is the worst of these and only grabs a non-legend. However, the restriction barely matters for us in our deck of random raid bosses that are often not legendary. Final Parting is expensive, but is effectively a black command in our deck. Either grab a big target to resurrect a skeleton and a free removal spell, like Snuff Out or Deadly Relic, or Filth and Urborg to swing out against unsuspecting opponents. This deck can get value out of the card immediately, which is always important for your 5-drop cards. Now for the fun part. Let's meet the cast and crew of our Dance Macabre. Troll of Khazad-dûm swamp cycles for 1 mana, then becomes a 6/5 with our commander. Twisted Abomination is not as good, costing an additional mana to swamp cycle, but being a 5/3. Void Beckoner will be the biggest target that puts itself in the yard with impressive 8/8 stat, and when you cycle for 2 and a black, it gives something, preferably with no abilities, or something small in combat with something large, Death Touch. These are all great includes fixed mana, and give you instant speed actions to hold up alongside your removal, not to mention affordable options. I strongly recommend including these in any Xu-ifit list, no matter the bracket. Phyrexian Soul Gorger is an 8/8 with one hell of a drawback. Scaling self-sacrifice to keep it around. It can sacrifice itself to be reanimated from the yard for a 3-mana 8/8 with no drawback, or it can be tutored into the yard after your best ones, or discarded from hand. I mentioned Phyrexian Dreadnought, but the actual best game piece for this commander is Death Shadow, one of my favorite modern cards. In most commander decks, this is unplayable, as it only turns on when you're at less than a third of your life total. However, for 1 mana, it dies, and you have to make a new copy, just at 13/13 bones. Rockcurse Rakshasha can get itself in the yard by being a fragile attacker, despite the 5/5 trampling body due to decay. We can either bring it back as a beater, or use the renewed ability to make sure our opponent's creatures can't block, and will die the turn after they attack. Having Cabal Coffer's mana really helps hit the whole board here, and we can sacrifice it at instant speed to put in the yard to use renew ability. Eater of Days and Hunted Horror really benefit from Torpor being out, or even an opposing Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines, can actually boost our strategy. However, I would still not risk running Eater of Days, as it's reserved for only reanimating without abilities in most cases, but Hunted Horror can lead some fun political plays as long as the player promises not to swing the 6 power at you. The 3/3 Centaurs are pro-black, however, so you have a good amount of colors and artifact creatures to block with. Nixit also benefits from Torpor, which is a 7/7 that gets -X equals the number of cards in target player's hand, which it only decides at its ETB. No ETB, 3 mana 7/7. But also with Xu-ifit, you just get a 7/7, so there's that too. Another one is Inverter of Truth, since the Void works with Xu-ifit, go figure. It comes back as a 6/6, always colorless, and you can cast it if an opponent tries to mill you out, and it'll be a 4 mana 6/6 flyer. But as is the case with a lot of our creatures, we want to reanimate the vanilla versions. Not all of them though. Clackpit's Troll is a 5 mana 8/8 with Trample and Haste, one ETBs, which can be cancelled by a Torpor Orb, giving an opponent some 0/1 go. And it has the drawback where whenever you go to combat, an opponent sack a creature to tap it, but then you gain 3 life and draw a card, which is a card engine every turn. You can always sack this to get the 8/8, or you can just have the Thornbite Staff equipped to this and it will never stay tapped. Usually you play this as itself after a board wipe and a skeleton in most other situations. Moving right along, we've got Shakedown Heavy. This is the Desecration Demon of 2023. It's a 6/4 menace, and only the defending player can decide to remove from combat, and if you draw a card. This one gets you value much more often, and the body is also sweet for Zoo. Rotting Regisaur is a massive 7/6 for 3 mana, but at the beginning of your upkeep, you discard a card. In our deck, that's not a bug, that's a feature. This will let us put other targets in the yard, and we can sacrifice the Regisaur if we no longer need it, just to get the 7/6 attacker right back. Another discard outlet on a beefy body is Plague Reaver, a 3 mana 6/5 with a minor drawback. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice each other creature you control. Now, this is mitigated by being able to discard 2 cards to donate it to the opponent of your choice. They have the option to do the same to somebody else, but you're passing around a hot potato whose burn you care about the least, as we have card advantage and benefit from our cards being in the graveyard. Relic Golem is a 3 mana 6/6, but it can't attack or block unless an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. You can also tap it to have any player in mill 2, including us, to find more pieces to reanimate. This will often be turned on by the mid games by the game being played, but its own ability can help justify playing this creature over reanimating it. We do want to minimize the creatures like Eater of Days and Massive Eldrazi that are useless outside of being Massive Skeletons for Xu-ifit, because savvy opponents will always try to shank your linchpin commanders early. You need to diversify your basket. Doom Whisperer was ahead of its time. It's a 5 mana 6/6 flamper with no downsides. This doesn't even need our commander, it's just good. Paying 2 life to Zerail 2 just because can fill our yard and turn through less optimal cards to draw, and we have some lifelink to get that back in combat. Egon, God of Death, is useful as a Throne of Death, milling us each turn and exiling creatures to draw cards, if needed, but more likely a 6/6 Death Touch for 3, which requires exiling 2 cards from our graveyard during our upkeep to stay in play. If we can't, he sacrifices and we draw a card, only to bring him back later on with our commander as a 6/6. Lastly, Eldrazi Titans don't reset the graveyard when we bin them. Because of Nicholas and Cabal Coffers, it's fully possible to actually cast the powerful spaghetti monsters, but even if we get them back from our yard, they're massively beefy threats. Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, is an inefficient way to deal with artifacts and enchantments, but he can do that. More importantly, he's an indestructible 10/10 who shreds your opponent's library in exile. Emrakul the Promise and lets you mind saber someone. It's also 13/13, and the 13 mana is reduced by the number of card types in your yard, so she can cost as little as 7 mana to actually cast. You can use another player to help you finish someone off, or blow all their removal, or even make them wipe the board if you have to. Or more probably, she's a massive reanimate target for our commander, but it's nice to have applications and gameplay outside of that, which is why we aren't running random Eldrazi just for the power toughness. Our last one is actually the best for our deck, Kozilek, the Great Distortion. It's a 12/12, but if we actually cast this, we draw back up to 7, and then we can discard cards from our hand to counter spells. And by putting creatures in our yard, we can get them back as reanimate spells, and then it's a menace 12/12. This card's great. If you don't have your ramping lands, it's very tough to cast these, but you can always discard them and reanimate with your commander. So there's that. To do our best to find our ramping lands, we have Urza's Cave and the previously mentioned Expedition map. To get those, or the new Station Land in black, Secure Secundi. Station 12 is triple in this deck. That could often mean tapping a reanimated creature the turn it comes out, and then boom, instantly turned on, like me when I saw this commander. Then each turn we can tap the land, paying 2 mana and 2 life, sacrifice a creature, and draw up to 13 cards. Not a bad rate. This is the best home for Sakura Secundi, hands down, and that land is as powerful as a blue one in the right shell. At the very least, we can turn on the quickest and easiest using the least resources. Our big reanimated skeletons don't have evasion when they come into play, but they can be given evasion. The list was tight, so I cut Cover of Darkness, but it's a good option. It's just typal and can't get through black or artifact creature decks. It was like the 104th card. We are, however, running Minas Morgul, Dark Fortress, as it doesn't take up a spell slot and can permanently give our big fatty Shadow, which isn't unblockable, but it's the next best thing outside of Horsemanship, of course. Not to mention, we could also prevent an opposing creature from blocking by giving it Shadow. Bump one big Skelly boy in particular, we have 2 options in creature form. They'll both behave a lot like enchantments. Herald of Torment is literally an enchantment. You can bestow +3/+3 and flying to punch even harder than a Skellyman. Then if the creature is enchanted to dies, you get a 3/3 flying demon, and if that dies, you can make a 3/3 by tapping your commander, but will likely have better target. Carcier Revenant is the latest upgrade of Vampire Nighthawk we didn't know we needed. It has flying, death touch, and lifelink to either race opponents or hold down the fort. When it gets put into our graveyard, we can give those 3 very useful abilities to one of our giant attackers. And they're much more impactful when the stats are quadrupled. With the exception of Death Touch, that one remains equally impactful. Lastly, we have Kiss of the Hellraiser. She can spawn us zombies and we can make crimes on our opponents with removal, graveyard hate, or ironically, even giving them 2 3/3 pro black centaurs is a crime. Who knew? But more importantly, she gives our skeletons and zombies plus almost 1 on Menache, meaning it'll be harder to chump these beats. She also has Ward 2, so despite being a lightning rod, she's the easiest to kill. Corpses of the Lost is our last sweet tech for skeletons. A cursed Junior does exist, but our commander does it more efficiently, and we can only afford so many colorless lands. Corpses gives all of our skeletons +1/+0 and haste. Not to mention it spawns an additional 2/2 skeleton that becomes a hasty 3/2 on entry. This will need to be cast after the creature's entered due to layers, but you can pay 1 life to bounce it if you descended, which means something as trivial as discarding a card or sacrificing the skeleton it made, putting it back into your hand to be used at your convenience later. Skeleton Crew is an option to run to give you more skeleton synergy to be down, but I find it a little slow. 4 mana to get a 3/3 with your commander out, but if you don't have Xu-ifit, this is very little. The 6 mana to bring it back from the graveyard is nice, but again, very slow, and your commander can already get huge things. I much prefer the new LG Acolyte. It can draw up to 3 cards per turn at the cost of 1 life each if you connect with each opponent at the table, but is itself a 4 mana 4/4 lifelink. It can also spawn you colorless bodies if you trigger Void, which is useful for any mono card deck to have, blockers for cards of protection. It's not always necessary. When it comes up, it can keep you alive versus a pro black monstrosity like Animar. This is a much more impactful token maker than Skeleton Crew, even if it lacks the type of synergies. It also still has text, and at that rate, very good text when your commander's not out. It's very important to look at your decks through the scope of what am I doing if my commander is somehow incapacitated, because it will happen occasionally. You don't want to have an awful game, and this deck really needs to have a plan B, which it does. And even then, we have both of our mono black answers to enchantments for those oubliette type effects. Edge of Eternities was just better. Disciple Bolas can ETB to sacrifice one of our massive skeleton fodder pieces and draw cards and gain life equal to its power. Hymn of the Faller can be Nice Whisper on steroids as long as we sack a creature or crack one of our artifacts. Even casting Dreadnought or Shadows to them die and get into the graveyard counts. Massacre Girl, Known Killer, gives all our creatures Wither, which is great to main whenever a 12/12 or 13/13 won't kill in combat. More likely, however, the blocking creature's toughness will be reduced to less than 1 and they'll die, letting us draw a card off our second ability. This turns chump blocks into a card draw for us. And when creatures are this big, there will be a lot of chump blocks. Massacre Girl, Known Killer also combos very well with Toxic Deluge, as even if she dies, she will see whatever else dies and draw cards. Ripples of Undeath is a great card advantage in Mill Engine that comes down the turn before our commander. Usually this just mills 3. You pay 1 mana and 3 life, you can bring one of the milled cards to hand. Hostile Negotiations is an instant speed card advantage spell that is a crime for Gissa, and lets you draw 3 and mill 3. So the opponent has to choose which pile goes where, and you reveal 1 pile. I'm a sucker for these types of mind games cards, and this one is so effective because any creature you bin can easily be put into play with Xu-ifit. Now for our removal. Dealers are our sleeper of choice here, as our stuff is generally much larger than our opponent's stuff. As for the rest of our removal, with the MDFC Fel the Profane, Deadly Rollick, and Snuff Out as being free as invaluable. This is an aggro deck that wants to deploy threats, and when in combat, we don't want blockers. Withering Torment is fine at 3 minutes and it kills creatures or enchantments at instant speed, and Rest in Peace is rare but would otherwise ruin our whole career. We also have Feed the Swarm for redundancy, but it's definitely the worst of the two. Bitter Triumph is a 2 mana instant that kills a creature or planeswalker, but also lets us discard a card as part of the card, or pay 3 life if we have no good targets or don't want to descend. Price of Fame is an instant that can surveil 2 and also is almost exclusively used for picking off opposing commanders to reduce the cost, but the Surveil 2 can be very helpful in finding threats. We also have Witch King of Angmar as a deterrent to attackers, making opponents sacrifice an attacking creature when they connect. Plus, it has built-in protection for itself that is simultaneously a discard outlet for our targets for Xu-ifit to reanimate, and it's a flying 5/3 to boot, a real jack of all trades. Putrid Imp is a 1-mana discard outlet that comes out before a commander, but unlike the Witch King, that's really all it does. For more discard, we've got Rankle Master of Pranks. It comes down, attacks with haste, turn after our commander comes out, and each player, including us, discards a card, but for us it's an upside, and we can also attack our opponent's hands. We could also make people sack creatures, which we can again get back very easily with our commander, or we can make everybody draw a card, which I use the least. However, the combination of aggression and disruption makes Rankle an excellent card for this deck. For the absolute maximal discarding disruption, we're running Dark Deal. Wheeling for us is not a downside because we can see a whole new hand, put all our creatures in the yard, only to reanimate them, whereas for opponents it could be devastating, plus they see one less card. To round out the non-land cards, we have Emperor Bones, the most generically good skeleton. It's also Graveyard Hate that can resurrect the hasty attacker from any player's yard, plus in this deck it benefits from our skeleton synergy cards. As far as other utility lands, we have Bogart Trawler for more Grave Hate, Demolition Field for non-basic hate that won't mess with our swamp count, and triggers Ascend, and Tomb Fortress to reanimate things in mill because we are in mono black, and that land's amazing. Spymaster's Vault pumps our attackers and connive us to slew through our deck, banning creatures and drawing cards. And lastly, Migrosity of Mako, since most things outside of our commander are expendable, and it's basically a 3-mana draw 3, but 1 is a tap land. To complete the deck, I'm running the Nebulous Mana Symbol Swamps from Theros Beyond Death because I think they're awesome. Commander is really all about making it your own and having fun with it, and this commander is super fun and unique. I really hope you enjoyed this deck tech. Please, if you have a friend who's thinking of building this commander, it'd be a huge help to me if you could share this video. I'd love to grow the channel, and the more views and exposure I get, the more time I can devote to pumping out more videos for all of you, just like Xu-ifit pumps out skeletons. As always, I'm sfreezy, but this time I'm asking you to please enjoy the crap out of this new set. Wizards did an amazing job. Find a commander or modern card you like, make it your own, show your support for the original ideas in the game, and keep on brewing.